Well, hello everybody. We are doing a series of questions today, and one of my Scavenger Steve followers from northeast England, a little town of Barnard Castle, he's been a follower of mine for the last several months, and he's come over to the United States, across the pond as we say, and I said, hey, I'm doing some videoing, and how would you like to video me in a few videos? And he said, sure, why not? So he's over here visiting. His name is Mr. William Jackson. He knows quite a bit about YouTube and about internet technology and all of that. And so you'll be hearing his voice in the background. He's going to ask me a series of questions about me and who I am and how I got started and where I'm headed and what my goals are, and just some general questions. So here we go, Mr. William Jackson.
Hey there. So my first question is, what are you most famous for, and how did you make your mark on the world?
Well, I don't walk around every day seeing myself as famous, but I have written some books. I've written 4 books, and I'm in the middle of doing 2 others right now, and it's hard to do 2 at the same time, but it's easier when you video your books, and then you transcribe the words onto print or into print. And so that's precisely what I'm doing. I'm doing my childhood stories, and then I'm doing a reflection of the past and the witnessing of the changes of an era, of all the different eras that I lived through when I was growing up. But so anyway, I'm going to ask you to ask me that question again.
Okay. What are you most famous for, and how did you make your mark on the world?
Okay, so I don't know what I'm famous for. I've written a series of books. They all start with, until now, they start with Scavenge Your Way. My first book was published about 7.5 years ago, and I start all my books until now with Scavenge Your Way. I first wrote Scavenge Your Way to Wealth, and then I wrote Scavenge Your Way to Real Estate Riches, and then I wrote Scavenge Your Way to Shacks on a Shoestring, and then I wrote Scavenge Your Way to Multifamily Miracles. And these next 2 books that I'm working on, there will be documentaries as well as an audio version as well as a printed version. And so they'll have titles completely apart from scavenging. So anyway, I'm known as an author. I'm known as someone that's very heavily involved in real estate. I bought my first house in early 1977, so we go back almost 43 years. And I tell everybody I started with a bulldozable shack and worked my way up. I never took anything for granted, just continual baby steps, one by one. And I just kept going forward. I had a vision of real estate, and that's another story for another time, unless one of these questions provokes a thought here coming down the pike. So what am I famous for is some of my writing ability. I had severe dyslexia, and when I was a child, I never thought that I could even write a paragraph, let alone write a book. And it's really, I've found my stride in writing. Also very heavily in real estate, from bulldozable shacks to 150 unit apartment complexes between here and the south coast of the United States. And in recent years I've been doing not only apartment buildings and single family dwellings and other smaller dwellings like 8 plexes and 16 plexes. I also have been buying lots of hotels and motels. So I'm making my mark. I'm in my 60s. I feel very good for my age. And people say to me, when am I going to retire? I say, well, I don't know that. If I can continue having fun like I am now, I'm never going to retire. And I am having fun. And what was the second part of that question?
How did you make your mark in the world?
How did I make my mark? Well, I think I don't know if I made my mark in the world, but I've made my mark here in the north central part of the United States, and also between here and the great state of Texas. I have a Holiday Inn in San Antonio, Texas, and a very nice. It's a 3-star plus, very nice place, and a very nice part of San Antonio. I'm very proud of that purchase. Also, several years ago, I bought a Comfort Inn and Suites, which is also a 3-star, and that's up in the Austin area. And so some of my purchases and my businesses are over 1,000 miles apart, but it doesn't really matter to me. I have a daughter that's headed for Spain. She lived over there 7 years until the last few years, and she keeps saying, "Dad, why don't you buy a hotel over in Spain and I'll run it for you?" And I'm fluent in Spanish. I have been for 42 years. And I really like traveling to Spain and all the other Spanish-speaking countries, and I wouldn't hesitate to buy over there if I found a good deal. So the next time I go over, I just might be looking around. And that's one thing about real estate. You're always, unless you get out of it entirely, you're always sort of looking around. You're looking over your shoulder for that next deal. You're thinking that that's going to be the biggest and best bonanza that you've seen up to this point. So you continually think that way, and that's what drives people like me that are in real estate. They know that that next purchase could be the very biggest one that they've ever been engaged in their entire lives. And so that's why we eat, drink, and sleep real estate. We can't turn our minds off, and my mind will probably always be focused on real estate until the day that I end this life and go on to the next one.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what you did before getting into real estate investing and scavenging.
Yes, what I did before that. Well, in high school I worked with a contract painter, and I used that business to build up my equity, to build up down payment money so I could buy my properties one by one. I also worked as a full-time teacher. I actually was a teacher for 14 years. I really loved geography and history, and I really loved Spanish. And I ended up teaching geography and history for 7 years. I ended up teaching Spanish for 7 years. But that job, even though I liked it, it was like a subsistence wage, and my heart kept telling me all along, you've got to cut your own path. You have to create your own destiny. You reach a point in time where you just have to let go of other jobs where somebody else is your boss, and you have to decide that you can really make your biggest mark in life by being your own boss. You need to cut all ties. I tell people it's like the best thing that'll ever happen to you, regardless of what you're in, is to cut all ties and think of yourself as sailing to a distant land or a distant island. And you arrive, and the day you arrive, you set fire to all of your ships, so there's no chance of escape. And then you set out to conquer that island, or you set out to conquer that hinterland, and there's no chance of failure. Failure, you completely erase that word from your mind, and you go straight forward, and you use your mind to the fullest extent, and you will always find answers to your questions. There's an expression that I'm looking for now. It doesn't occur to me, but I think it's occurring to me now. Might have to edit this tape if the words don't come out just right. But when the student, here's what you can write this down, repeat it yourself several times a day for many, many, many days continuously. When the student is ready, the teacher will always appear. Think about that. It doesn't matter what it is. You can be planning a real estate career. You can be planning on playing a guitar or playing in a band. Doesn't matter what instrument it is. You can be planning on doing this or that or the other. And the more you think about it, the more that information goes to your subconscious mind. And here's one thing, the subconscious mind never shuts off. It's going 24/7, and it's sorting through the information. It's filtering through all of the information you've fed into it. And at that same time, it is looking for answers for you. And the answers that you've always been looking for, regardless of what it is, if you can visualize it, all of those answers one day will just sort of tap you on the shoulder. They will come down from the sky, and they will literally land in your lap. Think about what I just said. This is very powerful information. Very, very powerful information. You can go out and you can conquer the world, but you need to work at your daytime job and do these other things, real estate or whatever, in the evening, on weekends, on holidays, until you have enough of an income built up so you know you're not going to starve to death. And that's when you really turn on the afterburners and you really use the brains that God gave you, and you can do miraculous things, but you will never know that until you decide to be your own boss, okay? So keep that in mind. I wish somebody would have pointed that out to me back when I was in my mid-20s when I started buying property. Okay, what's the next question, Mr. William Jackson?
How did you get started in real estate? How did you get started as a real estate entrepreneur? And can you tell us about your first deal?
As an entrepreneur, a real estate entrepreneur, and I got started in my little hometown of Union, Iowa back in 1977 in the springtime. And I bought a little bulldozable shack and had some money saved up for my little painting business. I was teaching and I was also painting, and I had some money saved up, and I put that money down on that house. And a little town of 300 and some people where I grew up in north central Iowa, U-N-I-O-N, pronounced Union. And of course, if you're listening to this in Spanish, you'll think Union. But I do have several videos in Spanish, by the way, and I'll have a way for you. If you're bilingual, you can click over to my Spanish programs or my Spanish YouTube channel, and you will find me. And so I think I'd better stick to the English language in this one. I don't want to upset anybody's feelings in any way. And I hope I answered that last question sufficiently. In entrepreneurialism, that's being your own boss and making your own decisions and learning from others, learning on the fly, learning by the seat of your pants. You don't have time to get on a plane and fly to London or fly to Los Angeles or Toronto or whatever and go to some 3 or 4 or 5 day seminar and pay thousands of dollars. You need to get started and let people around you teach you. You go in and out of plumbing shops and you will run into plumbers that will be patient. They will see something about your personality, or they will love your voice tone. Your voice tone maybe reminds them of somebody that they used to play with when they were a child, or some other adult that they're working with, or whatever. And then the people, we feel the best about ourselves as human beings when we know that we're reaching out and helping somebody else in need. Think about that, what I just said. So what does that mean? That means that there's always somebody waiting to help you. And then when you get a gist of everything around you, and you're going, you find yourself, you've hit a stride and you're doing well, the money's coming in, you're watching your budget ever so carefully, you're building equity, then you take time out to jump on a plane and fly to LA and pay a couple of $1,000s and go to one of those highfalutin seminars. And by the way, I've always learned more from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 people that I bumped into and I've shared business cards with, and I started calling those people right away the day I got home to say, hey, how you doing? How do you take care of this problem? What is your viewpoint on this? What is your viewpoint on that? I've always learned far more from bumping into people and keeping up with them than I ever did any of the seminars, although I've gotten a pretty good idea or two from some of those seminars that I went to and paid a lot of money to go to. But in the early days, you need to stay in the trenches, you scrape your knuckles, you bang your elbows, you rake your knees against the asphalt or the cement, you bang your head a little bit here and there, and that's how you learn. And go to the lumber yards, go to the electrical stores and the plumbing stores, plumbing shops, and you go here and there, and you'll get acquainted. And be willing to meet somebody halfway. If you're a very introverted person, I would suppose that I don't know anything about psychology, but I would suppose that you might have a strike against you. You need to open up and meet somebody halfway. Say, hey, how you doing? I wish I had that coat you have on. Hey, would you like to go to coffee sometime? I really like the way you express yourself. Is there any way I can take you for coffee? Don't be afraid to extend a hand to someone. Ask them to say, hey, I'd like to take you for lunch. I like something about you. I don't know what it is, but something tells me that we've got some chemistry. Let's go for coffee sometime. Where do you live? What's the best time? Do you work Saturdays, Sundays? Do you get home early in the afternoon? Do you have any mornings off? What would be the best time for me to call you? You have to reach out to people. And you'd be surprised how they respond, but you have to reach out to people first. Maybe not in every case, but I would say in more than half of the cases. So another very important PowerPoint for you to keep in mind, okay? I'm almost 69, all right, so I've got lots of knowledge to share with you. And if the shoe fits, wear it, okay? Stop this video, put it on pause, grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper, and if I can help you, I'll be most happy. Like I said a while ago, human beings we feel the best about ourselves when we know that we are helping somebody else in need. And what is it they say? Excuse me, a friend indeed is a friend in need. Think about that. Another powerful point to make. All right, Mr. William Jackson, give me another question.
How did your background, personality and upbringing pave the way or influence your choice to get into the business?
Well, I was driven by my dad, and he was a very black or white person. I mean, it was his way or no way. And he worked us way beyond what anyone else would have worked their children. He crossed over the line many times. He was very shrewd and very crude at times. But I suppose his work ethic was instilled in me almost from the time I could walk. And how I got involved in real estate, I'll take a moment to tell you. This was the summer of '67, and I needed a summertime job. And I went up to the filling station in the north end of town. A guy by the name of Kenny Madlin owned that, and I worked for his brother-in-law in the restaurant by the guy by the name of Orville Norman that ran the OK Cafe. He said, my brother-in-law Kenny's needing some summer help. Why don't you go up there and see him? So I went up, and he said, yeah, Steve. He said, I could use you. And I said, well, what kind of money can you pay me? He said, I pay $1 an hour. Very frankly, very straightforwardly said, I pay $1 an hour. Well, I knew at that time, since we baled hay, we shelled corn, we had done, we walked soybean fields, cutting out the volunteer corn with a machete for several farmers. We did all kinds of things for farmers and other people, and about half the people in the mid-60s were paying $1.25 an hour, and this man only offered me $1 an hour. I may have said yes, but he said, well, you can think about it for a day or two and come back to see me. I said, okay. I think that was my escape that I needed. But I still had made up my mind I didn't want to work for $1 an hour. So I went back down to the little town park right on Main Street, and a couple of older gentlemen there. And I talked to K.S. Wooten for a while, and he had a corn sheller. He was retired, and I'd shelled corn with him. He couldn't give me any ideas as to how to create a summer job. And I went over to the next park bench. A man by the name of Chuck Eggleston was sitting there. He run the floral shop, and he was retired. And I think the floral shop was just to supplement his income. And he said, well, Steve, he said there was a painter a farmer that lived south of town that also painted. He moved to Albion a year or two ago, and his name is Bernard Felper. He said, I'll bet you 10 to 1 if you drive down to Albion that summertime is just now coming on. This was in May of 1967. He said, I'll just bet you 10 to 1 that he just might offer you some work. I think within the next hour or so, I got in my car and drove to Albion, 13 miles south of my little hometown of Union, and he had just gotten home. He was out in his garden. He was on his knees pulling weeds. I want to say he was picking peas, but he might not have been. Anyway, we talked a while, and just within a few minutes, he said, yeah, he said, I'm looking for a summer helper. And right away, without me asking what he could pay, he said, and I'll give you $1.25 an hour. And that was music to my ears, so I started painting with him and painted that summer. Now, here's what I want to tell you, how the idea of real estate got implanted in my brain. This was October of 1967, and I'd work on an occasional Saturday for Mr. Felper. Called up and he said, this coming Saturday, Steve, he said, I've got one more outside job to do. You know, in October it starts to get cold, and you can't continue here in Iowa, you can't continue to paint outside because of the freezing temperatures and the ice and the snow and all that and the winds. And so he said, can you come this Saturday and help me? He said, you can help me all day Saturday. He said, that'll be just good. He said, my son-in-law is coming up, and we three can get that job done, and then I'll have all my exterior jobs done for this year. So I drove to Albion. When I got there, the frost was all over the grass, and the ground was just completely white. So we had to wait for the frost to burn off. and before we could start painting. So I got there about 8 o'clock. We sort of sat around the kitchen table, had a couple of more cups of coffee, and told a few more stories. Pretty soon the three of us got in the truck and started to back out the driveway. And Bernard put his foot on the brake and he said, "Oh my God," he said, I forgot my Camels," which was a cigarette back then. I don't know if they still exist nowadays or not. They might. But he smoked the little short ones without filters. And they may still exist. But anyway, so he stops, puts the truck into drive, pulls back into the driveway, runs into the house to get his cigarettes. And his son-in-law and I were sitting there in the cab waiting for him to get his cigarettes and come back. And his son-in-law was Bob Bailey. And he looked at me and he said, "Steve," he said, "see that house down there on the corner?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, Bernard is in the process of buying that." And right away I said, "Well, what on earth would he want to live down there for? This house is 10 times better than that shack." He said, No, you don't understand. You don't understand. He's going to buy that. He's going to put a tenant in there. In a few years, that tenant will have paid off that mortgage. It'll be all Bernard's. It'll be waiting for him when he retires. Look at all that income he'll have. And he's also got these other 2 houses to the west of him. And he's decided to buy as many as he can. And he's just now about to sign for that one down there on the corner. I said, "Oh." He said, "You know what, Steve?" He said, "You need to think about that." He said, "That's an idea you need to consider, because it just might make you rich someday. So you need to think about that." And that idea stuck with me. That was October of '67, and I was 16. And 10 years later, when I was 26, I bought my first house. That was the message that this brain needed to receive at that time. And that's what launched me onto my real estate career.
How do you find your investments, and how do you decide what to invest in?
Okay, well, lately I've been going for hotels and motels. But how do I find my investments overall? I find I have a filtering through process. If it's bulldozable shacks, I look at 10 of them or so, and then I find the one that's the least bulldozable, the most easy to repair, and the one that I can infuse equity into in the quickest way possible with the fewest amount of investment dollars. So it's very, very simple. There's nothing scientific about investing. And it's a very forgiving business. You can, unless you make a huge error, you can pay a little bit too much for a property. You can misjudge the amount of materials that you need by a little bit, to 10 or 20%. Like I said, it's a very forgiving business. You can make up for that, pull a little bit of equity maybe out of another property to shore up the one you just bought. And in a little while it's producing for you. And then it's also gaining. Here's one thing: every time you buy a property, you have 3 huge advantages. You have the inflation. Now, inflation in the poor ends of town over the last 100 years in the United States, anyway, is something for you to remember. This is a very powerful message that I'm about to give you. That we have about 4% inflation of real estate properties in the poor or not such good ends of town. We have about 5%, that's per year, 5% inflation per year in the average parts of town, and about 6% per year in the better than average to the very good parts of town. So if your name is on the mortgage, you're making money. If you buy a $100,000 house, even if it doesn't make you a penny, maybe you break even on the rent and on the expenses, and one would hope that you wouldn't break even, but you would make money. But even if you barely broke even, you would have an additional $6,000 waiting, or $5,000 or $4,000. Usually a $100,000 house is not going to be in a poor area, so it's going to be in an average area or better than average area to a very good area. So you're going to have, what's 5% of 100,000? That is 5,000 is 5%, and 6,000 is 6% of $100,000. So you have the inflation, you have the pay down of the mortgage, which adds to the value of the property, and then you have your improvements. you can infuse labor and materials into the property, and you can take it from a $100,000 house to a $125,000 house just by giving it more curb appeal, maybe putting on shutters, maybe putting on a brass doorbell and a brass kick plate across the bottom of the door, maybe a little brass lamp above the door, maybe a little brass mailbox to the side of the door. You see what I'm saying? That kind of thing, along with a paint job. Maybe you can put some fascia on it of a different color. Maybe the base color is beige. Maybe you can put a dark brown on the fascia and around the windows, and maybe paint the foundation to give it extra pizzazz. Maybe you can change some flooring on the inside, take out some carpet that's starting to show wear, and put down solid flooring. And maybe update the cabinets a little bit. Maybe you can put some additional insulation in the ceiling to cut the fuel bills down. Maybe you can put thermopane windows. I know you people across the pond where Will comes from, they call that double glazing, don't you, Will?
That's right.
Yeah, double glazing, but we don't use that term over here on this side of the pond. We usually say thermopane windows. But anyway, so there are all different kinds of ways to improve the property. So you have the improvement of the property, or the curb appeal, and you have the pay down of the mortgage, and then you have the inflation. You put all that together, there's three ways. And then another thing that I didn't mention, a fourth thing, it just occurred to me now, of course you would assume that you buy the house don't buy at market value. You rarely can come out if you pay the full market value. You've got to get one that needs a little bit of work, or you need to find a don't want or seller so that you can buy it for 10 or 20 or 30% under the market value. And then if you don't have any money at all, like I tell everybody, I started with less than nothing. You get in there and infuse your own labor. And you start to build equity. Once you start to build equity, that starts to perpetuate itself. And so my fourth point then was the rents. One would suspect that you would have enough money left over to bank at $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 or $600 or $800 from the monthly rent that you collect, depending on what you pay for the property, depending on what your mortgage rate is. So think about that. So you are gaining in those four areas, and that's very, very powerful. You can't do that if you're working 9 to 5 for somebody else. You have to have real estate. You have to have real estate to do anything in this life. Now that's a broad generalization, of course. Some of you are already taking offense to me, but I'm talking about to really make a splash and to have some holdings, to have some wealth, to have some riches. You have to do it through real estate. You can do it through diamonds, through jewelry, and a few other things, but you almost always, in the long-term gains, you have to buy real estate and sit on it and hold it and watch it grow for you. Short-term gains, yes, you can buy dairy cattle, milk them twice a day, and hire people that will milk those for you, and you could have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of heads of of dairy cattle. And there are other ways to do it. You might even be able to do it with honeybees. You could probably do it with honeybees and just rent a little piece of ground out in the country without even being the owner. And they're all different kinds. It depends on where you are. I need to see some of you in person, and I could mentor you, or I could coach you. I could tell you exactly how to get from where you are to where you want to go in the shortest possible time frame. To have the maximum effect on building equity. That's what you want to do. You want to build equity. You can't get anywhere unless you start building equity. Once you start building equity, you can just fly to the moon. For a house that you bought 6 months ago, or a year and 6 months ago, is already building equity. You go back to the banker and you say, I think I've got a little bit of equity. I've done some improvements. The mortgage is paid down a little bit. We've got a year and a half's inflation here. I'd like to be able to pull out $15,000 or $20,000 and make this other purchase. Can you send somebody around to do an evaluation? And if you're already banking with them, they will say yes. and maybe the evaluation costs you $300. But what the heck? You can just keep buying and buying and buying just with your signature. That's what I did. The bankers made me wealthy. Think about that. Bankers are just waiting to make you wealthy also the same way as they made me wealthy. William, what's the next question?
What mistakes have you made along the way, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and you always, to get better at anything, you have to take it on the chin. We call that the school of hard knocks. You have to learn the hard way, unfortunately. If it's really going to stick in your brain and you're really going to use that to launch your business and to stay focused, you have to have gone through the school of hard knocks. One of those, I'll just tell you, take a couple of minutes to tell you about this. In 1989, I took about 10 years, I took a 10-year hiatus, or about a 9-year hiatus from real estate. I was going to graduate school, my kids were little, and I just sort of, the economy wasn't doing so great. Here in Iowa, you heard about, oh, Reaganomics is really taken off, it's really going great guns, and yada, 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 and but it was on the national news, but here in Iowa, things were dead in the water. And, I loved Reagan. He was known as a great communicator. I loved his speeches. And on paper, I guess he did quite a bit for the United States, but here in Iowa, we didn't see any effects of that. In Iowa, the economy was really slow. But so in '89, I decided to start buying again, and I bought an old house. It was 3 units, and I converted it to 8 units, and I still have that house. But I just no more than had it. I think I had it 1 year, and the owner back behind, across the alley and behind my property, had knocked down 2 giant-sized Victorian mansions that were built, I don't know, 130 years before, and brought in caterpillars, bulldozers, and loaded the debris, took it to the landfill, leveled the ground, and built a business. But immediately, since my sewer was connected to the sewer of those other 2 properties, my 8 tenants were bathing every day, washing dishes every day, flushing their toilets every day, and little by little that water came down that hill and turned and went to 3rd Avenue and turned and went down and went right underneath the front door of a little cafe called the Home Cafe. Well, those people didn't want that sewage water in front of their door, and they called the city of Marshalltown. City of Marshalltown gave me about 24, 48 hours to get a plumber there. I had no choice. I went to the bottom of the hill, about 2 blocks. I went to Hartwig Plumbing, and I told them my situation. I was a young man just kind of getting involved in real estate, although I had bought about 4 properties between 77 and 81. I let the biggest part of 10 years go before I got started back in real estate, as I just said. So this was about 1990. Went down to see him, and he said, I'll tell you what, Steve, this is Friday afternoon. He said, I'll take a backhoe, and I'll drive it up to that property right now, and I'll park it right there. And so I was scared. I didn't even ask him for a price, because I was scared that the city of Marshalltown was going to shut me down. And boy, they went way out of their way to scare the life out of me. And so he started working on it the next week, and he bought me some time. I had to be thankful for that. I didn't realize, I should have gone around talking to people about, does the city just throw a huge scare into you? Will they give you a little more time, or what's going on here? I felt like I didn't even have time to get to filter through 2 or 3 or 4 bids. I felt like I had to get started right that minute, or I was going to get locked up and they were going to throw the key away. They talked about me having to move all of my tenants out to a motel and have to pay their room, board, and lodging at a local motel until I got the problem resolved. And all of this, they really threw a scare into me. And so I felt like I had no other choice. I didn't even take time to go get other bids, as I just said. So I went to the bottom of the hill, about 2 blocks away. I went to Hartwig Plumbing. Now, this man, he was a very nice man. He's passed away now. But he had, everybody around town said that he was not unlike him to overcharge. Well, I mean, I had to have somebody, and I didn't even bother to filter through other people that could give me a quote. And he did the job, sent me a bill for $5,000. It was an enormous amount of money to dig a trench alongside the house to put in a new sewer pipe and run it, instead of running it east where the sewer did exist. We closed off the old sewer and then ran it out the south side of the building and turned like that and went down to the street in front of the house, which is 2nd Avenue. But so that cost me a lot of money. I need to hurry the story up here. So about 20 years later, I had about the same kind of problem at a different property. About the same width of trench needed to be dug, the same depth of trench needed to be dug, the same type of 6-inch PVC needed to be put into place. Everything was almost identical. I called around 3 or 4 or 5 people that had backhoes. I finally got a hold of a guy out by Garwin. His last name was Dechamp, D-E-C-H-A-M-P. And he said, yes, he said, I can do that. He said, I know the property well. He said, I'll do it in one day, and I'll drive in, I'll do it, and you get a plumber right there to put that in place. I will cover the trench in before I leave, and I'll be back home that same night. And he said, I need, I don't know, I've got it written down somewhere, but it was like, I need $350, and I also need $40 to drive my backhoe at 30 miles an hour or whatever from Garwin to Marshalltown, and then at the end of the day, when I get the trench filled back in, I need another $30 to drive the backhoe from Marshalltown back to Garwin. Well, that was a minuscule amount of money compared to 20 years earlier when I paid $5,000. So did I learn? Did I learn from my mistake? Absolutely I did. I just showed you how I did. I took time, I called around, I filtered through bids, I called and called and called. There aren't so many people around with backhoes, but if there were 4 people in this county, I called all 4, and I got the very best price. And the little bitty amount of money that I paid, like I said, was totally minuscule compared to what I'd paid roughly 20 years earlier. So did I learn? I learned. I hit a home run with what I learned, and that's what you have to do to keep going. It's hard to applaud mistakes, especially when they kick you in the gut, when they really bust you upside the head. It's very, very tough to keep going sometimes, that you have to learn from those mistakes. And looking back many years later, you almost have to applaud those mistakes, because those mistakes are what keep you focused. And it's all known as the School of Hard Knocks. What's the next question, William?
What interesting projects are you currently working on?
Well, I mentioned a moment ago, in the last several years, I'm buying all hotels and motels. I'm currently transferring, we're doing a complete remodel job in my Holiday Inn in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm bringing up the furniture, which is only 7 years old, transplanting that into my 2 motels. I have a motel in Des Moines, Iowa. I have another motel in Urbandale, Iowa, and I have a 3rd motel in Marshalltown, Iowa. And I'm bringing up that furniture as opposed to selling it for 5 cents or 10 cents on the dollar. Bringing it up, scavenging from myself, transporting it to Iowa, and transplanting that furniture into these motels here. And it comes at a good time because we will be able to raise rents. We're at the point of needing to raise rents anyway. So that tells you very specifically what I'm doing now. I have enough equity to go buy another Holiday Inn. And when we get this remodel project done in December of this year, just a couple of months from now, I will be looking for another Holiday Inn. So that brings you, I kind of gave you a short answer there, but I went too long on my other explanation, so I'm kind of shortening things up here, so I'm not sitting in this chair all day. And believe me, I really love real estate. I love talking about it, and I could sit here for several days in a row. So to avoid that, I'm going to try to speed myself up just a little bit. Okay, what's the next question, Mr. Jackson?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Well, 5 years' time from now, as I just hinted a couple of moments ago, I'm continuing to buy real estate, and that real estate is hotels and motels. And I have enough equity growing now that continues to self-perpetuate that I believe that I can buy one luxury hotel or a very nice Holiday Inn every, let's say, 2 years from now until the time that I'm no longer alive. And as long as I'm feeling good about it, I feel like I'm in complete control. I feel very, very good about myself, probably than what I ever have before at any other time in my life. And everything I do makes me feel better about myself as we go forward in this life. I believe I'm going to probably continue buying Holiday Inns or probably 3-star hotels and 4-star hotels, and possibly I'll get to a DoubleTree, a Hilton DoubleTree, which would be a 5-star or 5-star plus hotel. That might be on the horizon going down the road in 5 years from now. That just might be what I'll be knocking on the door at purchasing. Next question.
What does it take to be an entrepreneur, and can anyone do it?
What does it take to be an entrepreneur? I think you have to have drive, you have to have focus, you have to have concentration. You have to really, really want to do it. You want to make something of yourself. I came from nowhere, so I had to reach for the stars because there was no other way to go. And so I had to drive. I think my dad installed that in me, and the work ethic. He forced us to produce way beyond anyone's normal imagination, and he wouldn't allow us to complain in any way. And that was a real strong work ethic that I almost was born with, and that has propelled me to bigger and better and higher heights, as I should say. What was the second part of that question?
Can anyone do it?
Can anyone do it? I don't think so, and I don't mean to disappoint you, but there are some people that are very timid, they're introverted, they don't make conversation very well. They, the introverted person goes away from the crowd to find himself, and the extroverted person is drawn by the crowd and goes toward the crowd to find his or her strength. Introverted person finds his or her strength by going away from the crowd. I don't know anything about psychology, but I think you have to have an inner spirit that just is boiling with enthusiasm, and you really have to know that you want far more out of this life than what you've seen so far, and you have to be willing to pay the price. And I don't think everyone can do it, because you have to eventually become your own boss. And some people are just scared to death. When I taught years ago, some of the teachers would say, well, you're leaving teaching, and I sure wish I could, but I don't know what I would do. I fear the future. I don't know. I feel like I would start something else and fail at it, and I wouldn't be able to live with myself. They were just so insecure that they continued teaching and didn't bother to look for any other type of work. And so with that mentality, those people can't be entrepreneurs. Oh, maybe they can by running a lemonade stand on a corner on a Saturday morning or something, helping one of their kids do a fundraiser or something like that. But that's not true entrepreneurialism either. So they can dabble with it. Maybe they can find moderate success. But I think you have to read, you have to look at documentaries, you have to fill your mind with stories of people that have been there and done that have experienced great success in this life. And you have to just strive for filling your head with those kinds of stories and that kind of enthusiasm to be able to go forward, and not everyone is willing to do that. If you're willing to do that, yes, then everyone can become an entrepreneur. If you're not willing to do that, and I've met people that aren't, those people are not able and will not be able to become an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
What advice would you pass along to other investors and would-be investors?
What advice would I pass on to other investors? I would just say that you have to have something that drives you, or to not get into it. You have to really be able to visualize it. You have to be able to eat it, drink it, and sleep it. You have to be able to taste it. You have to be able to hear it. You have to be driven by little bits and pieces of information that can get you from one little place in where you are to the next little place down the road and where you're going. And you have to program your thoughts to think that way. And I don't know, did I answer that properly? All right.
And the final question, how can we learn more about you? What are the names of your books and what other projects can we look forward to seeing from you in the future?
Well, let's start with the first portion of that. Read me the first portion again.
How can we learn more about you?
Learn more about me. I'm going to have a YouTube channel up soon, and it'll be scavengeyourway@gmail.com. And you can learn a lot about me. I have a series called Scavenger Steve where I film myself talking about a project that I'm remodeling, or somebody else is working for me, or I'm doing it myself, or an idea that I've been carrying in my head for a long time that I want to share with you. All those kinds of things are in the Scavenger Steve videos. So you'll have that. You have some other projects I have coming down. I've got two other documentary films. I have one that I did about 6 or 7 years ago I haven't released yet, but I will be releasing very soon. So let me think. Get something distracting me. Someone's trying to call me, and my phone is humming, but I'll try to finish the question. What's the second part of that question?
What are the names of your books?
The names of my books, I mentioned those once, I'll mention them again. The one I'm doing now is Fortunes of the Unfortunate. It's about my childhood and all the obstacles that I faced. I have another documentary coming out and a book and an audiobook that I haven't found a name for yet. The ones that I've written now, the one that I'm about to write within the next year is Scavenge Your Way to Massive Passive Income and Real Estate Investing. And the 4 earlier books I've written are Scavenge Your Way to Wealth, Scavenge Your Way to Real Estate Riches, Scavenge Your Way to Shacks on a Shoestring, and Scavenge Your Way to Multifamily Miracles. 2 of those are available on Amazon.com, and within a few months those 4 will be available on Amazon.com, as well as the 2 books that I'm working on now. And so there you have it. Did I answer all those?
Absolutely. There's also one more thing. You also have a Facebook page coming soon?
A what?
A Facebook page coming soon.
I do have a Facebook page, and I can't comment too much about that. I'll just say for you to look for me on Facebook. And I'll be under probably Scavenger Steve, and or Scavenge Your Way, and I think you'll find a lot of good things coming down the pike. And I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I wish you all the greatest amount of luck in the whole wide world in real estate endeavors or whatever else you decide to find yourself doing from this point in time forward. Thank you very much.